So I thought there was going to be some big announcement today, but from infrared, but I guess not. I was under the assumption that he was going to announce the org or whatever. Um, I'm not sure what it entails. I have no inside information or details about it. Um, I know their long-term goal is to take over the CPUSA, which isn't like an awful idea, obviously. Um, there's a couple points to be made about that, I assume. Um, I guess the first one is like, I know they just want the brand, right? Basically, that's probably one of the first points. Um, the second point is how they're going to accomplish it, I suppose. Um, in which case, if they did do it, it would be very interesting. I was talking to Comrade JU, um, I guess it was last night, or now I can't remember because it's like 1 in the morning now. But I can't remember if it was the day before or whatever. But I was talking to him, and we were talking about this, and we were saying that the goal isn't to uh, necessarily, um, you know, just take it from Joe Sims, right? It's to take it from the Democrats, meaning they take it away from the notion that they're associated with the Democrats, right? Which is a strong move. Obviously, it's a bold move. We think if he can pull it off again. I don't know if they can pull it off. I don't know if, for example, if he can't even control his Discord server at certain times. I don't know how he's going to control 50 different organizations. There'd have to be like 50 different houses. You know what I mean? Or something along those lines, right? It'd have to be um, a pretty authoritarian regime. Which is not, I'm not saying it's something I wouldn't do, but I'm just saying that that's what I would have to unfold. So if you're going to have a chapter in every single state or multiple chapters, depending how large the state is. Um, so it's interesting because we were discussing how it would disassociate the way MAGA identifies communism with specifically the Democrats. However, I think this is a little bit of an overblown uh, connection. I've seen no real evidence that the CPUSA specifically is the link that MAGA is making between Democrats and communists. I think this happens more at the state level. I mean, this is the federal level, of course, but at the level of the state, than it does at the level of this puny little organization that has what, less than 25,000 members nationwide, right? I grew up in a city that had like twice that, and it was a small city by comparison. However, can you imagine if the CPUSA came out and endorsed MAGA? It would be um, nothing short of uh, not paradigm shifting, but it would be nothing short of like audacious. Because can you? I can't. I mean, I can't think of a communist organization that is endorsing Trump outside of like the sphere of the internet, um, in like these little online hordes. So or like maybe some contrarians, right? Because MAGA, so it's not. So when MAGA communism started trending last year, for example, um, it was so far out from being um, a concept that people could like get their heads around. Like even when I mean, I even when I first heard it, I had to think about it really hard. It wasn't just I didn't have a knee jerk reaction like those two things don't sound alike. It was more like okay, let me think about this for a second. Actually, it's funny because when I was in there was a Telegram that Jay had started, which had incorporated some of the infrared members. I think it's no longer going, but some of the infrared members who didn't know me at the time, like really jumped on me because I was making. They thought I was making like kind of like the criticisms that leftists were making, but I wasn't. And one of like the bigger now infrared members was really on my ass, and I won't say who it was, but he was he was really up my ass. It is no, I'm getting off track, but I was like, who is this guy? It's just they're audacious. They're just absolutely belligerent, um, in like an interesting way, I guess. At the time, I thought, like, oh, how adorable. Because to me, like in my mind, they're like it's like they're like they're what you would call like young Turks. They're supposed to be unabashedly um, flagrant in their um, mm, youthful optimism. I would say, like I'm an optimist myself. I'm not a defeatist. I think this is winnable. I think communism is going to win regardless. I think it wins regardless of what we do. I think most of the time communists get in our own way. However, this idea of them taking over the CPUSA, I don't know if how long it would take to do. I hope it doesn't take to 2036, which is again, I think it's just some weird arbitrary date. I don't know how they calculated this date. It could be done, I think, a lot sooner. But let's see, is Taz going to stream tonight? I don't know. If he does stream tonight, then maybe he will announce something, and then I will have to completely um, redo this. But as of right now, it doesn't look like um, he's going to stream. But if he does, he does. It doesn't matter. And then I can always go back and add to it or just redo it. But anyways, um, they have. I think even has your whoever the brain trust is over there. I don't know if he has like an inner circle of people he talks to and or just delegates to, or they have like a round table where they talk about their ideas. Like I know he's like their thought leader, so a lot of the planning and organizational stuff comes from him. But even so, that even becomes too big for one person to do. It's easy to do it online, right? Because once you become, my understanding is once you get to a certain point where you're big enough online that you start to need mods, right? So like even then, like extrapolated to the real world, you would start to need like real life kind of mods, um, but they would have to be closer to his line of personality, right? If he wants to maintain it. But that's not what I want to talk about. I want to talk about the idea of do they have the imagination um, to really go after the CPUSA and to possibly. I know Jackson has a huge following online, but could they? And they're all talking about, oh, Jackson for president 2024. Yeah, 2024. I was like, all right, how about this? Jackson for CPUSA head, and they install him as the face of communism or the American communism in at the helm of the CPUSA. How about that instead? That's much more of a bold initiative because he can't. I mean, he can't be the president, and to have him hold some puny little office would also not um, probably bear any meaningful fruit for them. Like if he like, I know he ran when he was not a MAGA communist guy, like 4 or 5 years ago or something, and for city council, but like that would be almost kind of useless for him for someone of his um, reach and social media presence. But if he were the head of mm, I don't want to say like a legacy party because like their legacy is dog shit at this point, and but they are inherited from the tradition of I want to say a once formidable movement, but now they're obviously the lapdogs of the Democrats and even the progressives. And they even denounced last year, Has and Jackson. But to take them over and then um, and to turn it into something along the idea of what I was talking about was like a communist mafia, where instead of having um, these organizations where we're sort of out in front and center all like immediately, rather we lurk in the shadows for a bit while we're organizing. But I understand that anything, if you want to do something in the form of direct action, at least requires some organization. That's just true of anything. It doesn't have to necessarily even be political, right? Organization doesn't have to be political. It could just be forming to do something and then waiting to spring a trap, right? And this allows us to time for coalition building. It allows us time to get like our ducks in order, or ducks in a row rather, and the rules in order, right? Because what I wrote about when I was talking about in the blog that I posted about underworld communism, um, what I was thinking about mainly in terms of getting a, a multivalent coalition on board was that initially, okay, you have to overthrow the existing um, representation. This is what the mafia did with, or Charles Luciano did with Maranzano, and he did with um, Joe Mazzaria. At the time, there was always in the mafia just one boss, the boss of bosses, right? There was always that was like their pyramid, right? It was like a paramilitary pyramid, and it was that's how they always set it up. There was regional bosses, and then there was a boss of bosses, and but not everyone kicked up to the boss of bosses. If I'm if I'm, if I'm correct on that, it was just okay. This is the guy that had the most power and influence within quote unquote the mafia. But it wasn't quote unquote the mafia really until um, Luciano took it over and turned it into a national organization. And that is what the CPUSA has failed to do in its waning influence over the last, 50 to 90 years. And so I'd be very curious if has has a plan that thinks kind of like this, where you can get okay, you start initially with your inner group, right? Your inner core, your people you trust the most, right? And then you start adding people that you can vet, right? Because it can't be like the actual mafia the way the commission did, because everyone in the commission kind of like it was self-understood, right? When they accepted all the five families because the five families were immediately put from New York were immediately put on the board, right? And then Chicago was added, Kansas City, Buffalo, um, and then like some lesser families were like always adjacent. And then there was of course still like the Jewish mafia, um, or the Jewish gangsters like Arnold Rothstein and Meyer Lansky and I'm forgetting the guy who started Las Vegas, but him. Um, so there can always be additions once you've vetted everyone, and there can be a vetting process, and there can be like here's what our goal is, and the goal has to be really ambitious. I don't think right now I'm convinced that CPUSA 2036 is an ambitious goal. I haven't heard all the plans yet though, and has us keep playing that close to the vest, which is probably smart. And I'm all about like tactics and strategy and what we can do to shock and awe the state. And part of that has to do with building a coalition so fucking enormous that it really is like we're sleeper cells a bit. I think I mentioned this a little bit in my blog. Not that we're going to do anything illegal. We're not going to be like bombing fucking hospitals or something like that or whatever. I mean, sleeper cells in the economic sense, where at any moment, at any time, we can just, you know, snap our fingers and shut the economy down and make a demand. And what is that demand? I'm I don't think Has would agree with me, and I don't think anyone in Infrared would agree with me, besides maybe like Rev or something like that, or possibly Kareem, or possibly some of the people who are like kind of they don't like us, but like they agree with our basic idea about attacking deficit spending and attacking the state as such and where their weakness lies. Um, but if we made a demand that they balance their budgets, for example, and that was the only demand that and we shut down aspects of transportation. We shut down because remember now we've say it took a year to take over the CPUSA, and say it took another year to have a sit down with. I don't want to keep using like mafia lingo, but like these other families that, and we'll say that they're unions. Some of them are parties. Some of them are maybe people who have um, disaffected from other parties, or because I think Has in his last stream he did, or maybe two streams ago, he was talking about how there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be leaving the liberal institutions, and I agreed with that. I said now's the time to swoop them up, and you don't have to agree with their specific sociocultural politics, right? But can we agree with the economic thing that we want the state to be um, liquidated, to use Bannon's term? I mean, that's what Bannon basically said. He wanted to liquidate the administrative state. I mean, I want to go further and just liquidate the entire fucking thing. However, if he could pull it off and because Jackson probably now has enough juice. I mean, if he's talking to people like who are pretty big, like if he's going to be going on that guy, um, uh, Patrick Bet David, is that his name? Um, yeah, Patrick Bet David. Um, if he's going to be going in that guy's show, that guy has like a pretty. I mean, that guy's pretty big on YouTube. I think he's got like Joe Rogan esque um, viewers, or he's like a Joe Rogan. Excuse me. So he's kind of like in that Joe Rogan esque territory of getting like um, mm, big guests. So that's, I mean, right off the bat, he's going to be talking to be able to promote certain things to a wide audience, and also to like a libertarian, right-leaning audience as well. I don't think the people who watch Patrick Bet David, excuse me, um, are liberals or Democrats for the most part. Just in the same way that I don't think people who watch Joe Rogan are that either. They might be more like left libertarian or just center right or maybe just full blown MAGA people. They might, but it doesn't seem like the average Joe Rogan fan is um, a Democrat. I'm guessing. I don't know. So having said that, I mean that's a pretty big um, advantage, at least to have someone who has that kind of reach at this point, especially in the short time frame that he's achieved it. So to not have him out front and center of that, it would be probably a mistake not to abuse that like to its max. I would imagine. Now, how do you stay relevant? I don't know, because like the the contrast is this: how do you stay relevant while staying underground? And I don't know. I mean, you don't have to tell people what you're doing, but if you can contact the 10 largest unions, which I think make up something like almost 6 or 7 million people, or 5 or 6 million people, or something like that. And that's not counting some of that. That's not counting. Um, I don't think that's even counting the AFL-CIO. But I wouldn't. I don't know if I would. I don't know if I would include the AFL-CIO because um, they are like totally a Democratic front. Um, but they have a fuck ton of members. Because it represents 12 million active and retired workers. So um, again, I don't know. I don't know if they would be someone I would want to put up there. Um, let's see. Um, and I think the other issue that would come up is something I had mentioned when I did like just a small review of um, his own thought processes on doing a sort of broader coalition, is that he wants this thing to be like as pure as possible. And at the level of people's individual beliefs, not going to happen. It's impossible, right? He acknowledges that to some extent, but like really, if we just had one common aim, like the commission had a clear goal, make a fuck ton of money, and that was easy for them because they were, they were set up as a business, and so their explicit goals was just make money hand over fist, just like a sort of business or corporation or capitalist enterprise. And the other thing was their code of omerta, right? Never admit the existence of this thing, La Cosa Nostra. So like we can apply, excuse me, the latter, but what is their goal in the long run, right? Now, JU and I already have a clear goal, which is bring the whole thing fucking crashing down. I don't know if libertarians have the stomach for this. I don't know if has the stomach for this, right? Because you can have the communism part, right? But you can't have the MAGA part unless you're going after deficit spending. So if he wants the communism part, he's gonna want to fuse this with MAGA, or somehow make them synonymous with one another. You have to go after spending, which would bring the whole edifice of the mode of production just to its knees. I don't think libertarians have a stomach for it. I think they would be begging Jerome Powell, "Oh my God, please turn the printing machines back on. Turn the print $4 trillion right now and stimulus." spending. Please, please, please push on a string. Excuse me. Pushing on a string is just a term for the ineffectuality of monetary policy beyond some certain point. I don't know who coined it, but it was definitely coined like during the Great Depression, um, and they used it all the way up until 2008. Um, Having said that, one thing that we talked about was JU and I were willing to go 50-50 and give Has $1,000 if he goes on Tim Pool's podcast or his show, or I don't know if it's the same thing, and talk about deficit spending as a communist aim to balance the budget, and then also explain why. He could play it cheeky and not be like, oh, we think it's going to collapse capitalism, right? Because then it's one of those things where it's like, oh shit, they know. Because I think the Federal Reserve knows, if I'm being perfectly honest. The Federal Reserve knows. All the fascist economists know, and I know this because I've read um, all these economists who are vehemently against a balanced budget. I have so many papers on my computer. Maybe I'll share them with this if I post this. That are about the either the detriments of a balanced budget or the limitations of a balanced budget, or there was an open letter signed by, oh god, like 150 prominent economists, one of them being Larry Sumner's, one of them being Robert Reich, and one of them being, I want to say it was Paul Samuelson, but he might have been dead by then, so I'm not sure. Um, and two of those guys served in the White House, so they know, they fucking know what a balanced budget would do to the economy, which is wrecking it. I mean, it would absolutely just nuke all the value in the entire economy as a category of wealth. So we don't have to bring that up, but we can bring this up. We could say, look, as communists, we want to unleash the productive forces. What is the most unproductive fucking thing in our way of doing that? Well, you can say, okay, some of it's unproductive labor, right? Well, where's the majority of that? Okay, so infrared goes on and on and on and on and on about fucking service industry jobs. Fine, automate them, whatever, who cares? But then you have to really realize that the people producing absolutely nothing is people in the state, right? And we want to go after those jobs, right? And we want to go after all that spending that it creates inflation, okay? And we want all that spending to be repurposed into the economy. Now the goal. See, this is a different argument than saying why aren't we spending this money on the economy, right? We want to say why aren't we, because that money does find its way into the economy, but on some level, right? Through contracts and through um, various subsidies that we give to people or whatever. But we want it to go into sectors where it doesn't want to go. We want to force capital to go where it doesn't want to go. The money capital, that is. And we want it to operate on some level at a loss. That's what we want them to do. We want the entire economy to start operating at a loss. Now, this is not something we want to tell them because, again, the only way to drive down the rate of profit, um, the only way to collapse it for good, is to um, employ a certain amount of capital with less labor incorporated into it. So that requires removing all this excess labor, which a lot of it is in the state sector, and at the same time having this tremendous amount of investment um, into quote unquote the productive sectors of the economy. And so the more they invest, the further the rate of profit is going to fall, rather than just handing over this excess capital to the state to be used for God who knows fucking what. So it will accelerate the productive forces, but it has to happen on a specific way. Whereas the way I think infrared thinks about it is, okay, we have to take over the government and then we can do good things for the people. But it's like that's what everyone thinks already. Okay, everyone already thinks this way. We're just going to use the existing technology that we have, or the versioning technology we have, and we're going to make investments into specific sectors. No, see, we can do both at the same time. See, the difference between his plan and our plan is that ours automatically induces this, but it also concludes the crisis that's been ongoing since 1929, rather than extending the shelf life of it. It's not like you just get to manage your way out of capitalism. That's easy. That's an easy way of thinking about it. We're just going to manage our way out of it. And I don't think that's the way. That's a fundamental difference in how Jay and I think about the crisis. We can't just manage our way out of it. We have to. Any direct action has to, again, force all this money capital to go and be invested where it doesn't want to, which is meaning forming a blockade between itself and the state. We don't want it to go to the state at all. We want it to go into. Now, it might not go to infrastructure type things, but it will definitely still accelerate the productive forces in different various industries, right? Yeah, and at the same time, they'll be replacing living labor. All those people that will be falling by the wayside from the state sector will be reabsorbed back into the private sector. And I talked a little bit about this with Mike Tremont in my interview with him. I said he agreed with me that they'll be absorbed into the private sector. He didn't agree, however, that this in itself is one and the same as completing the crisis, because he thinks that, oh well, the private sector will just magically make room for them. No, they're going to have to reduce hours of labor too, and that's part of it. That's also part of acceleration. Is removing a certain part of the workday that is no longer um, um, a a block of time for them on the whole for capital to extract profit, at least initially, right? As part of the first process of, of extracting surplus value, right? Realizing it's a different matter, but I'm saying that at least we want to circumscribe that part of the working day in which for them to do that, and then we make them kill themselves, right? We make them compete with one another to destroy themselves, to self-destruct, as they're all racing to automate. It sounds simple, but it's very difficult to pull off, because what you're asking people you'd be trying to get on board with this is the self-annihilation of their own jobs and their own way of life. So if a guy has been a fucking carpenter for 30 years and you're trying to, or an electrician for 25 years, and he's put in 25 years of being an electrician, he's paid, let's say this guy's paid into the system, not just his own union, but he's paid into his social security, and he's paid into his pension, he's paid into all these things. You're asking him basically to obliterate all of it. That's a tough sell. Hey, that 25 years that you put into it, the this thing that you've been going in and day out for a quarter of your life or half your life. You want to destroy it? It's a tough sell, man. That's why it's probably going to have to, I think some of the focus is going to have to be on the younger generation who are not so heavily invested into this, who are becoming part of the largest voting bloc, right? And I'm not saying that we're going to turn this into again, into some sort of electoral third party alternative. What I'm saying is we can turn it into a real, because he wants to turn it into a counter hegemonic like stronghold. And I'm saying, okay, you could have that, but you don't have to turn it into necessarily a party in the sense that you're thinking of. You could just turn it into here's this force that could shut down the economy at will and make the state and force the state to do something it doesn't want to do, which is stop spending, which I'm going to keep reiterating, right? That in itself is power because right now I'm not seeing it, and they haven't tried it either. So it's not like it's a knock against them. When I made my criticism, or rather my wasn't even a criticism. When I made my video about Jackson, what I was just saying is like, all right, he's built up his following. Has it stopped any spending? That's really what's most important. And then I got a comment. I think the only comment on the video was like, "Well, he's raising class consciousness." All right, so is other people. If you think about it, I mean, there are right wingers who are doing the same thing, right? I mean, like right wingers, not like conservatives, but like social conservatives, but like right wingers. Republicans. They're doing the same thing. They're talking about the working class. They're talking about um, their conditions of living under the state, etc., so forth, being overtaxed. So it's not like they're not saying the same thing or something similar, right? So like that's just again an info war. So how do we really distinguish ourselves then? Well, we have to distinguish ourselves by saying we don't want any of this, right? And here's how to actually win and form because here's what we want to teach you that this is what they actually want from you, the state, even the state, right? The state wants your labor power, and they want you to work till you're basically fucking dead, right? And it's been this way for a very long time. It precedes any most of the people who were even thinking about something like this. It precedes you even being born, right? And I mean, most of the boomers, it even precedes them, right? I think boomers goes back to like 46 or something. I can't remember, but maybe a little earlier. I can't remember the exact boomer cutoff age, but it even precedes them, right? We're talking about something that goes back to the early 30s, the silent generation, and those people are all gone. So we need to sort of like refresh people's memories a little bit about okay, where we are exactly right now. We're at a time where the state is the chief exploiter of everyone in the country, right? Let's not even think about the world. We'll just keep it to America, right? Domestically, they exploit everyone. They devalue your wages. They're the ones waging class warfare with inflation. You're being overtaxed. They're raiding Social Security. There's not going to be there for you, again, you younger people, anyone under let's just say 40, right? It's just not going to be there. Okay, do you want to spend the next half of your life just working for something that's not going to be there? Not only that, working 40, 50 hours a week for a dollar that's worth less and less and less and less, right? These are things that we should talk about with them. That's the dollars and cents shit that I'd rather talk to normal people about than like, hey, did you hear that George Soros is funding the LGBT movement? It's like, who cares? Like that is a total distraction, in my opinion. It doesn't affect their lives in the slightest. They may care about it in the sense that, like, oh, gee, I wish, we could go back to old family values. And I was like, all right, well, calm down. Let's get rid of the state first, and then you can live your life as you please. All right, and then you don't have to worry about any of this. And then all the George Soroses of the world, or whoever you're worried about, all the bogeymen of the world will go away as well. All right, because they live off the state. It's not the other way around, per se. Right? Yes, capital is lent from the capitalist class to the state, and so the state technically lives off them, but in reality, the capitalist class needs the state to launder this capital for them. So um, we have to figure out a way to make the state um, null and void and negate it, and to make it impractical for the mode of production to continue and necessitate its own existence. Which is like, unfortunately, this is not what anyone talks about. So I don't know what his strategy is, and I'll be curious if he. I still haven't seen anything about him streaming, and so maybe he's not going to. Maybe he is. I don't know. I was hoping that there was going to be some sort of announcement. Um, the last update I got was 20 minutes ago. Yes, I still get the. Oh, here we go. It just popped up, but I'm not going to be able to. Just very in the background. But I'd be very curious what they're going to talk about. So maybe I'll watch this and then redo this. So that's my thoughts on it. My thoughts are basically haven't really changed that much. I'll be curious what his strategy is going forward. And I'll be curious as to how broad his imagination is towards towards expanding this movement as broad and deep as possible within the number of alliances we can actually form, right? Whether it be unions, whether it be other quote unquote even anti-communist parties. Because if you think about it, like let's say the CPUSA grows like really big, right? Because like Libertarian Party is like so fucking up its own asshole. It really thinks it means anything. It's like, okay, you're 1 to 2% of the voting populace that you get every year doesn't qualify you to speak on anything, right? Now, if the CPUSA, if you took it over, rose to some extent, right, and it not only grows, but it's becoming it, it grows to the point where it has connections and to every single large union and other larger parties that aren't democratic, that aren't Democrats, then we can maybe start saying, okay, you know what? You have to listen to us. You have to come to us. We're not gonna because every libertarian just sort of treads on their street cred of being anti-communist and anti-statist, but at the same time, they don't have any real juice, right? There are some large libertarian accounts like Dave Smith and that Scott Horton, I want to say his name is. Could be wrong. And these are, they're pretty large accounts. So I think Dave Smith is definitely close to 1 million followers. He's a comedian. So there are some large accounts, big names and over there. But ultimately, are they anything? No, nothing. They're not gonna get in 2024. They're not gonna get 3% of the vote. I don't think. If I had to guess. if I had to guess. And I only say that because the polling data looks like it's more likely that someone like Kennedy is going to take votes away from Trump. And so more people are going to be voting independent Kennedy rather than vote so as a third party, rather than voting Libertarian as a third party. Their big shot was in 2016. That was their big moment. That looked like the most votes they had gotten in a very long time as a percentage of the national vote. Um, and then in 2020 they lost it, even though more people came out to vote than ever, supposedly. Um, but their share of it fell, so they're losing actually steam right now. They still represent a radical element of the I guess political spectrum in the United States. Um, I don't think right now, as a whole, communists are more radical than they are. Um, I do think that we have a plan to do what they want to do, and also to accomplish what we want to accomplish, um, because they're just all bullshit talk, to be honest with you, to be frank. Right? Their libertarianism is basically just to be edgelords online and say, oh, well, get rid of the Fed and get rid of this. It's like, okay, tell me how. Well, first you have to elect us, and then we'll do it. It's like, no, 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 no. That's not how it works, cocksuckers. That is not how it works. You tell me specifically how you intend to do it. But because they don't believe in what we believe in, which is like unifying the working class and organization at the level of we can actually force the state to do something, because they don't believe in withholding labor power as a condition to forcing the state into an action or an inaction that it doesn't want to do, right? Because they're Boy Scouts and they're like, we're going to still follow the law, even though we don't agree with it for some reason. And yeah, so like they're absolute Boy Scouts. The same thing that they wouldn't abuse executive powers if they ever became president by some miracle, right? Which I'm like, that's stupid. If a communist became president and they didn't abuse the executive powers that were bestowed to them, I would hope that every communist would fucking hang that guy. That's what I would hope. They would immediately rush fucking Washington D.C. and hang him. Why did we put you there? To follow the Constitution? Get the fuck out of here. No, none of that bullshit. And I'm not talking about like a Malcolm X by any means necessary, because like by that token, that doesn't explain anything. There has to be a specific way in which to do it, which is kind of why I like Vivek Ramaswamy's plan, because I was like, oh, he's at least telling me how he would do it and by what precedents, by what um, under what authority that he thinks that the president um, has, what rulings gives him this authority, right? Why it hasn't been done in the past, and why he thinks it could be done under a certain time frame, right? And he's done here. I'm talking about his plan to get rid of 75% of basically the federal government and just outright abolishing certain agencies. To which I would say, okay, that's something that is very not only detailed that I like. It's in the realm of okay, but I mean it's still only in the realm of like what if a communist won the presidency, right? Okay, but I'm thinking of like still underworld communism. What if we don't win the presidency? What if we're still trying to force them to do something from the outside, which is obviously entirely possible. And the civil rights movement was exactly that, right? Except they were trying to incorporate themselves into all of this. We're trying to disincorporate everything. So I think there is room for people in this movement that wouldn't traditionally be part of it. And I think that I'm curious. I'm going to watch this stream, and I may redo this entire. I'm willing to do it. I may redo this if he give some different kind of news on the organization, which I thought there was going to be, but maybe there's not. Maybe I was mistaken. I thought there was going to be some incoming news on the organization, but either way, my points still stand. And yeah, we'll definitely be willing to throw a couple of a couple $500 each from JU and I to talk about the balanced budgets on Timcast whenever he does it. So that's our standing offer. Cool.